Hi, everyone. First time doing a live here, so bear with me as I make sure I get things set up and going. You're never too old to learn. Never too old to learn. And I thought, well, part of this will be some of my learning, my education. So I'm Debbie, and my chapter is my chapter. I can't even talk. My YouTube channel is called Writing Life's Next Chapter. And on this channel, or in this channel, you are watching me as I progress through some midlife changes and keep everybody informed and encourage everybody else along the way who is going through some midlife changes, whether that is due to divorce or death of a spouse, changing cities, changing jobs, whatever that may be. We all go through changes, and there are times when we all just need to take a look at where we're at and maybe do a little reset, change up something or change up everything. And of course, if you're going to change up everything, you only want to do it a little. This live is actually a call to community for everybody to get together on here and share their experiences, share their lessons that they've learned, any tips that they have, whether that be financial, because a lot of us, when we go through a reset, it is because of something financial. In my case, I moved to Mexico when I was 62, and I had sold my house and had somebody put that money in investments for me, and my investments did really, really well. Just about doubled in a year and a half. But then, as what happens with all the investments, the bottom fell out for a while, and the person that was doing the investment panicked. And despite the fact that I told them where I wanted it held, my money held, they moved my money to something that they thought could earn more, and it didn't. So they moved the money again. And of course, every time the money gets moved, there's less and less of it to move. And finally, they broke it to me that they lost it all. So you can imagine, when you sell a house, I can say, yeah, that is my retirement fund. Because as a single mom raising 2 children, I did not have any room in my budget anywhere for a retirement fund. It was hard enough to make sure that I had money for emergencies, and quite often I never did. And that emergency would have to wait for a couple of weeks until I had some more money. So yeah, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and it wasn't because I wasn't making a lot of money. It was because I was not making a lot of money. Some things were minimum wage, some things weren't even that. When I left my ex-husband, my son was 4 years old and my daughter was 7 days old. And I had been working in an office. I was an office administrator with staff, and I was doing fairly well. There was no retirement plan for me. The company was a family-run company, and they just didn't offer that. So I left my ex and I moved hours away. I drove for hours to get to my parents' house, and myself and my 2 children moved in with my parents. Now, I was doing all right on maternity leave and what the government paid on maternity leave, and I had a whole year of that. And before the year ended, I started looking for another job, and eventually found one after my mat leave ended, not long after my mat leave ended, working in an office in a greenhouse. And little did I know when I started working there that the land, the real estate the greenhouse was on was up for sale, and there was a partnership developed with another family to build on their land, and the two businesses could work together, and they actually fit together very, very nicely. But then the garden center that I was working for closed down, and there was supposed to be something like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of just closure before the new place opened, and the new place didn't open until months after that. It took months to get the place built and open to the public, get the office built. So I was sitting around wondering what I was going to do. I was not collecting any unemployment at that point in time because I had worked for weeks, not earning much at all, earning a couple of $100 maybe, which would really bring the percentage of my EI down. And there's a wait time for your EI, so I never applied for EI. My fault. I should have gone ahead and applied for it anyways. So your wait time, I think it's 6 weeks, and I was only supposed to be out of work for 2 weeks. But here again, that didn't happen. So I was at a church camp with my kids and praying about this and thinking about it and praying about it. And I decided that what I had to do as soon as I got home was advertise that I was opening up a daycare in my home. And I did that, and that went fairly well. I didn't make a lot of money. I could not, as someone who had at one time a child in daycare myself, in a home daycare, I could not see the parents paying for the time that their children weren't there unless they called in sick or for whatever reason at the last moment. So I had a lot of part-timers, shift workers, and that kind of thing. So my income wasn't as high as the other daycares that were out there, but I thought it was the only fair way to go. It was good, and it lasted for a while. And then there were some laws brought in provincially. The kindergarten kids, instead of going to school every second day, were now mandated that they attend every day. And of course, the parents loved that because then they didn't have to pay for daycare. They could just send the kids to school every day. And that, on top of the busing changes that they had, meant that after school, if there were older children in the family that were not attending public school, high schoolers would be home before the public schoolers, the younger crowd. And that meant that the high schoolers then could babysit their siblings or their neighbors' kids or whatever until the parents got home, which basically meant, other than having little babies, I had no more clientele. And so I had to go again and switch gears again and decide what to do. Well, in the meantime, what happened, for a couple of days when I did not have any children, I had a friend call me up, and her husband owned a construction company. They were doing work on homes not too far from here, and she wanted to know if I was available to come clean with her because her daughters were no longer available. They went off to university, and she was now all alone. So I went and I cleaned with her. And lo and behold, I picked up a client almost right away. And from there, I just started advertising more by word of mouth that I was cleaning. And I ended up with a clientele that kept me busy. Every day I would make sure the kids got off to school, and then I would go and clean houses, and I would be home in time for them to come home from school. This was particularly important to my daughter. My daughter has trisomy X, and I am taking her right now to a psychologist for an evaluation for autism. And he's already taken me aside and he says, yeah, she's got autism, and it may overlap with something else. He's got to come up with a final conclusion. We have one more appointment. And just as a quick side note on my side note, for those of you who say, hey, you're in Canada, you've got free healthcare, go for it. My daughter's over 18 now. And so that excludes her from getting a free exam for autism. I have to pay for it out of my pocket, a couple $1,000 at least. We'll see what the final payment is that he's asking when we're there next. So dealing with all this and cleaning homes, and then the church that I was going to at the time, and I still visit there from time to time, they needed a replacement for their janitor. And so I piped up and said, sure, I'll do it. And that kept me busy. And quite often I was in there, well, I guess almost all the time, I was in there on Saturdays doing some last minute things. So everything would be beautiful and clean for Sunday morning. When everybody came, it would look welcoming. It would smell fresh. It would be clean. You could eat off the floors when I was done with them. So I had that. And then lo and behold, another church asked me to clean for them. So I did that actually during the week, because they did not use the church after Wednesday, I believe it was. They would have a meeting there on Wednesday. So I could go in there on Thursday and clean up the church, and it would be ready for them on Sunday. So my cleaning business actually grew to where I needed help from time to time. So I would hire somebody to come with me and help. And then I started expanding to 2 homes a day, or get the church all done, so I didn't have to do anything on Saturday, because on Saturday my son or my daughter would have a hockey tournament, that kind of thing. So I had an employee there and was doing quite well there, and I tore a ligament in my knee, and that hurt, and it hurt for a long time. And finally it was healing for me. And it was great, because I just realized one day it wasn't hurting anymore. So I was able to go out and about and clean homes. I had at least 2 ladies who always wanted me down on my hands and knees, scrubbing their kitchen floor, so that I could get in all the nooks and crannies and the like. And that kind of did my knee in. And one day I decided to buy a pair of Croc sandals, because everybody liked Crocs, and I wore them, and I wore them off and on, and my feet would get sore, particularly my right foot, and I ended up with plantar fasciitis in that foot. And I favored that foot so much, putting my weight on my left foot, that my left foot developed plantar fasciitis as well. So I was sitting down doing my chores as much as I could, washing the dishes, sitting down, whatever, because I had to take my weight off my feet, because my feet hurt so much. And I realized then that I was going to have to stop cleaning. From there, I went to work for a call center. And I did all right at the call center. I was asked to move into their office whenever their office person could not work for whatever reason. She was on vacation or off sick or whatever. They often came to me to fill that role, knowing my experience. I was on a committee that encouraged the employees, and I was chosen for an interview from another company who was considering working with the call center at that point in time. So I was doing okay. My sales were never as good as what many others were. I just was not much of a salesman, but I learned enough about phones. And that was a funny thing too. When I started working for them, I didn't own a cell phone. I had no idea how a cell phone really worked. I had owned one years and years and years ago, but if you're as old as me, you might remember the first cell phones actually plugged into the cigarette lighter in your car. That's how old I am. Yes, I'm 65. And it was a big learning curve for me, a huge learning curve. But what I had in my back pocket was that I knew about customer service. I grew up with my parents owning a restaurant and a service station. And so customer service was something that came naturally to me. I started working for them when I was 12, and when I was 18, I went away to college, and it was there because it was a part of my everyday life back then. So I did well with the customer service end of things. And from there, I found the most amazing jobs, two part-time jobs that together equaled easily a good paying full-time job. And one was in the church as the office administrator, and one was working for a nonprofit foundation as the executive administrator. And I was very blessed that the job for the executive administrator would work around my hours as an office administrator. And I was starting to be able to breathe a little bit better. Now, through all of this, in the last 10 years before I sold the house, I had this nagging little voice in the back of my head, and I'm sure it was God calling me to sell the house and to move. But I had no idea where I was going to sell the house. Excuse me. The house was so old. Part of the house was almost 150 years old. Excuse me. And the original part of the house still had the dirt basement with the foundation being stones, not cement blocks like you see now. And it was not doing well. I could not afford through all of this to maintain the home. I did get a new roof put on the home. I did have a rickety old deck torn down and a new one replacing it. So I had done those kind of things, but I didn't have money left over for, let's say, new windows, a new furnace. The furnace was something like 35 years old when I sold the house, still working, had minimal parts that you would have to fix. But I just kept having this voice tell me that I had to sell and move. And then the housing bubble came along. And I was still working for the church and for the foundation at this point in time. And I thought, you know what? I'm never going to get more for my house than what I am right now. So I sold the house. I got exactly what I wanted for the house. It was a negotiation, but I had a number in mind and got that, which I said, okay, now I've got all my debts paid and I've got a fair amount of money left over. That is my nest egg. And my son was not in town at the time. He was working several hours away. Excuse me. So there was just my daughter and myself. I found a 2-bedroom apartment. A decent 2-bedroom apartment was actually part of a house, had a yard and a driveway and parking for us, everything. So I went there and I was there for a year. I was only there for a year because way before the year ended, God kept putting it on my heart that I had to move. And so we went out and we looked at properties. I would always look at the real estate ads, trying to find something. And every time I looked at something, it just wasn't, there was something just not quite right with it. I did not want to buy a house with problems. I was retiring so soon, right? So I wanted a house that had been well maintained, but not necessarily big. I had been looking at small houses. I found a lot, and I thought maybe I could build. I went to take a look at the lot, and it just was not acceptable at all. So that kind of put a kibosh on things. But in the meantime, I was watching YouTube, trying to learn everything I could, and these channels kept coming up, these videos kept coming up about Mexico. Mexico was cheaper. Mexico was sunny. Mexico this, Mexico that, And I know a lot of us hear some really bad things about Mexico, but it's not all true. Um, I'll tell you about that in a minute. um, so eventually I said, okay, um, the Trudeau government here in Canada was going to close the borders, not allow anybody out, not allow anybody in. And I know they had some disputes over that, but they did not want anybody flying out for any reason, except maybe if you owned a property somewhere and you had to go check on it. So a lot of people that had property in I don't know, California and Arizona, Mexico, wherever, they were able to go away for the winter because they had to check their property. I didn't have that luxury. But I decided then to research Mexico, and after some research, thought, yeah, okay, if this is what's supposed to happen, it's what's supposed to happen. I will go to Mexico. I will take my daughter with me, my son, if he wants to go. He right around that time, um, his contract ended, and he was between contracts, so he was able to come with us. We all went to Mexico. I sold everything, gave things away that didn't sell, and what I had packed with me, that was my life, and the same with my daughter, and the same with my son. So we had a 6-month visa down there. And my son left 2 months early, about 2 months early, because he wanted to go and travel in Europe. There were some things that he wanted to do in Europe. He decided while he was off work, and he's got a really good paying job, so he could afford that. And off he went. My daughter stayed with me, but at the end of the 6 months, then she came back to Canada. She stayed with some friends for a while in their basement, until my son came back from Europe and got an apartment for them both to live in back here in Canada. My daughter had missed her friends and wanted to go work for the same place again, and she was old enough, being an adult, that she could make up her mind on that. And it was very sad to see her go, but I remained in Mexico, and I ended up being in Mexico for about 3.5 years. I did have a break in there of 4 or 5 months where I returned to Canada for a little while to be with my kids and to celebrate Christmas with them and all. So in the meantime, down in Mexico, I met somebody, and I still have ties to him. He's not in Mexico anymore. He's traveling about, and I hope to meet up with him soon someday. But I really enjoyed Mexico, and the lack of stress that I had in Mexico, even though sometimes my finances were tight, especially when I got the news that, I had no more retirement fund. All I had coming in was my CPP, which I had started to claim at 62. And that, combined with a bit that I had saved, got me through quite a piece. And then when I was eligible for the old age security, I got the OAS. And that basically put me through, but my debt was running up a little bit on my credit card at the same time. I was getting things for my daughter because she wasn't working year round, and didn't qualify for unemployment insurance because she didn't work long enough. So I wanted to help her out. My son didn't need any help. He was making enough, but my daughter, that was another circumstance. So here I am now. I'm back in Canada, paying off my debt. I am here with my son and my daughter. And I'm not enjoying Canada because of all the stress around the politics. And it doesn't matter where you stand on what side here with the politics. There's division, and there's stress, and there's talk about unity on both sides, but you can see there's no unity. It's very stressful for me. That, and My relationships, because I was gone to Mexico for so long, my relationships here with my family have changed and with my friends have changed. I've got a couple of good old standbys through there, but it's not the same. And they all, I guess, I can't blame them because they all know that I will be leaving Canada again when I can, and who knows for how long. I have now a permanent residence visa for, no, I'm sorry, it's a temporary residence visa for Mexico, what they call a temporal. So I can return to Mexico without needing to apply for a visa again right now. That still has a couple of years before it runs out. But there are other places where I'd like to live. Mexico is starting to get expensive. I said I would touch on the danger thing because that seems to be a concern with a lot of people. And quite frankly, it's no different than anywhere else. I'm here in a small town, and I had my purse stolen here. I had my purse stolen at a church. Not in the church, it was somebody from outside of the church that stole it. I had my purse stolen in Mexico, and it wasn't ripped off my shoulder or anything. I had put it down between my chair and a wall, figuring everything was safe there with my parcels. I had been Christmas shopping and stuff. And somebody came up behind me, and I was by myself, so I didn't know, and they took my purse and ran off with it. So Mexico or Canada, you can get your purse stolen. As far as the cartels are concerned, the cartels, for the most part, stay away from the expats. When I say for the most part, it's because if you get involved in drugs while you're down there, they could kidnap you or whatever, cause a crime. But that's no different here than any of the big cities, whether it's St. John's or Montreal or Ottawa or Toronto or Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. You go right across the country. And, even in some of the small towns, places that aren't that big, I'm thinking of Windsor and my town right here that I'm in right now. Fentanyl is a big issue here, a very, very big issue here. There's people dying quite a bit, and you never hear about them because the families are too embarrassed to put anything in the newspapers. Or why they've passed away in the newspapers. I know before I moved, right before my dad died, my dad was in the emergency department because he was having a lot of pain in his abdomen. And they ended up putting him in a room that was generally used for people that came off in ambulances, but there was nobody in there. At least there was nobody in there at the time. They did bring somebody in, and I was lucky enough, he fell asleep, so he didn't hear, but they did bring somebody in and try to revive him, and I heard them talking, and they were going clear, and all that stuff, and they had pronounced him dead. I heard them pronounce the time of death and everything, and they wanted to know if somebody was around to identify him, and his wife or his girlfriend at the time who he was living with refused to come in because she knew it was an overdose and she was taking drugs herself, and there were drugs in the house. So this is all what I gained from the conversation that I could hear between the police and the paramedics. So, that was happening then, and my dad passed away, gosh, 65, 55 years ago, maybe more. So there, I've been rambling on and on for a half hour. I think this is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it. I was hoping somebody might come on and have some questions for me. I will do another live chat some other time. I'm doing one now because my two adult children are away, which means the house is quiet, and I was able to get it done. So anyways, this is Saturday. I hope you're having a great weekend, and I hope to talk to you again soon.